Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, your window into the heartbeat of a continent and beyond. I am Gushin Garland and this is where Africa's story meets the world stage. From groundbreaking developments to global headlines that matter, we have got you covered. Let's dive straight into today's top headlines. Israel says it carried out a strike in Syria against an extremist group that attacked members of the minority Druze community near capital Damascus after an outbreak of sectarian violence that has reportedly killed more than 70 people. Sudan's army chief appoints a career diplomat as the country's new acting prime minister, 2 years into country's civil war. This comes days after the rival paramilitary RSF announced its own government in controlled areas. A Ukrainian drone strike on a market in the Russian-occupied town of Uleshki in Kherson region kills at least 7. The attack follows US-Ukraine minerals deal described as a new form of Washington's support for Kiev by the Trump administration. Severe weather conditions including heavy rain, snowfall, strong winds and large waves batter New Zealand. A state of emergency is declared for parts of South Island with school closures and flight cancellations in capital Wellington. And at 115, British woman claims the title of the world's oldest person. She was born before the Titanic sank and has outlived 2 world wars. We start with Kenya, where a member of parliament has been shot dead on a busy street in the capital. Kenyan opposition lawmaker Charles was killed by gunmen on a motorbike. The attack that took place at a busy roundabout in Nairobi is an area often manned by traffic police and covered by security cameras. Yet, the identities of both the shooter and the motorbike rider remain unknown. And an investigation into the matter is underway. President William Ruto has ordered police to conduct a thorough investigation into the attack, saying those responsible must be held to account. Now, not just President Ruto, but even fellow lawmakers have expressed shock and outrage calling for swift justice.
I passed on Ngondowere around 7 in the night at Parliament exit as he was addressing 5 MPs, and he was the one whom the MPs were listening to. I was saddened to have read the message that Ngondowere Mheshimiwa of Kasipul is no more. Call it to the family and may his soul rest in peace.
How I pray that this matter is going to be conclusively brought to book and we will know who murdered Honorable Charles Ngondowere.
Charles represented the Kasipul constituency in Western Kenya. He was a member of the opposition Orange Democratic Movement led by veteran politician Raila Odinga. And although Odinga contested the 2022 election results, which he lost to President Ruto, the two recently formed a political alliance. In fact, Ruto even formed a broad-based government in the wake of recent anti-government protests. Police say the nature of this crime appears to be both targeted and predetermined. According to local media, Were had reported receiving death threats 2 months ago. He claimed non-residents of his constituency had been disrupting his public events. Meanwhile, just a day before the shooting, he also reportedly stated that his vehicle was blocked after leaving a funeral and that he believed could have been attacked had it not been for his security detail. Family members have also said he repeatedly warned that his life was in danger. While many have described Charles Were as a sincere politician, his past controversies have also been highlighted in the wake of his killing. For instance, a case from 2010 involving the disappearance of a woman who visited his home in search of work. Her mother claimed her daughter disappeared after visiting Were's house and was never seen again. The killing comes amid growing political dissent in Kenya. Last year's protests against tax hikes evolved into a broader movement against the Ruto government. Multiple protesters were killed, bringing the conduct of security forces under intense scrutiny. And since then, there has been a troubling rise in enforced disappearance, often targeting government critics and protesters. Will this latest incident deepen political tensions in Kenya? To discuss further, we have with us Luke Anami, who is an international affairs expert from Nairobi, Kenya. Luke, welcome to Firstpost.
Yes, thank you so much for your welcome, Gavin.
Luke, what does the method and timing of MP Charles Vire's assassination suggest about the level of planning and possible motives behind the attack?
Yes, the level of planning, first of all, it suggests that this was a well-planned and meticulously carried out a killing, if you can call it an assassination. And it really was well-planned in terms of execution. And you could see that clearly this was a marked man, just as you have well indicated that he was a marked man. Kasipul is one of the constituencies in Western Kenya that is known for a lot of violence during election, and a lot of enmity within the constituency has actually spiraled over to national level. And so one would term this a local matter that was actually boiling, but the government was not paying close attention to it. The timing is also very important. Just recently, the BBC had released a documentary which indicated that how Kenyans were killed at Parliament on 25th of June during the riots against the Finance Act of 2023. And the timing is very key in terms that it actually comes at the time when Kenyans are debating how the killings have been being carried out in the past. Kenyans losing a lot of losing their lives to the police and security people. But this one comes into the new twist. This is almost like a personal attack on an MP who actually had lived a very peaceful life in the village, but because of his political opponents and the kind of violence that is carried out during elections, this has actually cost him his life.
Right. Rook, now given that Mr. Vire had repeatedly reported threats to his life, does his assassination point to a failure in the state's duty to protect elected officials?
Yes, it does to some level that actually the government has not been paying attention to its own citizens in terms of security. Here is an MP who had actually raised complaints and even pointed out, suggesting possible killers. But the government did not carry out any investigations, neither did it go and arrest those that he had mentioned. What the government did was it just gave him a bodyguard who was armed. Unfortunately, the bodyguard who was with him during the attack yesterday night could not respond on time. Also, the place where he was actually killed has security cameras, so the policeman should be able to find it very easy to arrest and know the culprits. But given the Kenyan political scene at the moment, one has very little faith in the security apparatus to carry out a thorough investigation and nail the person responsible for this killing. Hopefully, this will actually be able to ignite some fire under the belly of the government, that it needs to get to the bottom of this matter, given that if Kenyans are being reminded about how they were killed last year, and here is a killing of a member of parliament, then the question is, who is safe?
Right. And finally, Luke, what does Vire's assassination reveal about political violence in Kenya? Does his party's recent alliance with President Ruto have anything to do with it?
First, I will answer the last bit. This has nothing to do with the relationship between Ruto and ODM. Given that Kasipul is in ODM and it's in Western Kenya, but it's a constituency that is known to have a lot of violence during elections. Every cycle of elections, there's a lot of violence. And the MP was one of those who was known to actually unleash violence on his opponents. And perhaps maybe this was just maybe a revenge mission, perhaps from those disgruntled in the manner in which he has handled them. On the other issue is that, yes, it puts pressure to President William Ruto's government to actually come and say, okay, this is a member of parliament who belongs to a party that has actually come to support us. So what should we do? It will actually is putting a lot of pressure on President Ruto to come out clean, get his security apparatus to actually come and be able to investigate thoroughly, find out the culprits, find out the reason behind why this killing took place in a clear place, in a place where actually can easily be identified. Nairobi is manned by very good cameras all over the. So I've had the privilege to be in the police offices and been able to see clearly the cameras and how they work. So that should actually be a very easy case for the government. But then the question and the test is: will the government crack it this time round? Will the President William want to place his partner Raila Odinga that he can actually get to the bottom of this matter and dispose it off? So all the eyes are on the president and his security apparatus and how this will actually be used to ensure that this kind of killings do not occur. Violence is part of Kenya's politics right from more than a decade, the 2 decades now. And in most cases, anytime there's an election, there is a lot of violence unleashed on opponents, and as well as the government itself unleashing violence on its own people. And in this case of Kasipul, the government did not like the opposition. So you can see that when there is violence in Kasipul, the government paid less attention because it didn't see it's a region which is not, it doesn't get votes from, and it didn't see the need to actually send security to do all those investigations and reduce the violence. And you can see now this is a symptom of recurring of violence in election year. We just have 1 year to the election, and this can be a point of a very, very, very tense moment for Kenyan politicians as well as the rest of the public.
That was Luke Anami, who is an international affairs expert from Nairobi, Kenya. Luke, thank you so much for sharing your insights with Firstpost.
Thank you so much, Colleen.
For our next story, we'll look at South Africa, where the ghosts of the apartheid era continue to crawl back into the country's current political landscape. It stirs old wounds and raises questions about power and progress. The struggle for justice in the country still isn't over. And even after the end of white minority rule 30 years ago, victims are still awaiting reckoning. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a judicial inquiry, and the inquiry proposed is to find out if his past governments deliberately blocked justice for apartheid-era crimes. Now the move follows a lawsuit filed by 25 families. In the 1980s, these families lost their loved ones in state violence. They sued Ramaphosa's government, alleging the truth was buried intentionally. Apartheid was a cruel system of institutionalized racial segregation. It spanned from 1948 to 1994 and was enforced by the white minority government. In fact, under this system, black people were denied basic rights. They were ostracized and subjected to various atrocities, including torture and murder. Now, to expose these inhumanities, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC body, was set up in 1996. It recommended more than 300 cases for legal investigation. Yet, even then, only a few of those have gone to trial. Among the many cases that weren't pursued is the Crack Dog 4. 4 activists were kidnapped and murdered in 1985. The TRC denied amnesty to the policemen who killed them. Yet, to this day, not one has been prosecuted. The families of the Crack Dog 4 are among the 25 families suing the African National Congress. Ramaphosa's government has been accused of looking the other way and even allegedly stopping investigations. Critics have claimed that the ANC partnered with the white minority government secretly obstructed trials. And the new inquiry will now look exactly into that. Who stood in the way of justice and why? Ramaphosa's office said, and I quote, "Allegations of improper influence in delaying have persisted from previous administrations," and added that this commission is determined the true facts be established. For the families who have awaited answers, this offers a glimmer of hope, and it could be compensation for decades of silence. So even though South Africa may have ended apartheid on paper, but for many, the wounds still bleed. The question is, will Ramaphosa deliver what apartheid denied, or will the past continue to speak louder than the present? Shifting focus to Ghana in West Africa, where gold isn't just a commodity anymore. It's a strategic tool to defend the national currency. Ghana, which is Africa's top gold producer, is rolling out an ambitious gold purchase program aimed at shoring up its foreign reserves and stabilizing the Ghanaian cedi. The government has just signed a new deal with 9 additional mining companies, requiring them to sell 20% of their gold output to the state. This builds on a 2022 agreement with other industry giants. And under that deal, companies began selling a fifth of their annual production to the Bank of Ghana, settled not in dollars but in local currency. Ghana heavily relies on imports, which requires a steady supply of foreign reserves to support its economy. So, by purchasing gold in local currency, the government aims to reduce pressure on cedi by lowering the demand for foreign exchange and boosting Ghana's gold reserves. And seems like the plan has been working. Since launching the initiative, Ghana's gold reserves have risen sharply from just 8.7 metric tons in 2022 to more than 30 metric tons today. That's helped push the country's gross reserves to $9.4 billion. However, the latest deal also brings smaller and mid-tier producers into the fold. Together, these 9 new companies are expected to deliver roughly 200 kilograms of gold every month. But there's also a bigger play here, and that is fighting smuggling. The state-backed body Gold Board, which oversees the program, says formalizing gold purchases from smaller miners will help clamp down on illegal exports and boost local earnings in the sector. With gold prices soaring nearly 30% this year, driven by global uncertainty, geopolitical tensions, and the lingering effects of US tariffs, Ghana is betting big on the metal. It's a deliberate strategy to use gold as a currency shield, easing pressure on the Ghanaian cedi and reducing dependence on foreign currencies. Now, with this, Ghana is reinforcing its economic defenses amid turbulent global markets. It's a gold strategy not just for trade, but for national stability. Ivory Coast had decided it's time to declutter its street signs of colonial nostalgia and sprinkle in a bit of national flavor. After decades of driving down roads named after French presidents and faraway cities, Ivorians are now cruising along the streets that actually mean something to them. Ivory Coast's largest city, Abidjan, is saying au revoir to French monikers and shouting "Allo" to Ivorian heroes. But hold up, because there's one major change. The once revered avenue Valerie Giscard is now named after local legend and post-independence president Félix Houphouët-Boigny. This road connects the airport to Abidjan's city centre because, after all, having your own founding father on a major roadway feels a bit more relevant. Officials behind the street name switcheroo put it plainly by saying that the old names weren't really doing much for them. In fact, most Ivorians had no idea these French people were and neither did they care. And according to them, street names should reflect history and culture, just like some of its West African neighbors who have ghosted France entirely. Ivory Coast has also ousted French troops. It was under the French rule from 1893 to 1960. However, now it's cleaning up the guest list. In simple terms, France is not just uninvited to the party, but also no longer has a say in choosing the dance floor. Now the rebranding campaign with the price tag of $17 million aims to drag Ivory Coast's street system into the 21st century. The funding is being provided by the World Bank, the process for which began back in 2021. However, the signs started going up in March this year, and by 2030, at least 15 towns and cities will have a completely new GPS headache. So who are these people after whom the streets are being named? After consultation with civil society groups, these new names acknowledge Ivorian politicians, scientists, artists, athletes, or concepts. Gone is Marseille Boulevard, now proudly renamed after Philippe Yassé, who is Ivory Coast's first paramilitary speaker. Even the pompous Boulevard de France is now basking up in its glow-up. Marie-Therese Houphouët-Boigny Boulevard, named after the country's first lady. Clearly, this isn't just a renaming spree. It's a crash course in local pride. Experts say that it is important for Africans to identify the city's development. Locals say that they need street names that children can recognize. Because with 75% of the population under 35, it's time the signage got with the times and the identity. As a matter of fact, now it's not just about swapping names, it's about rewriting the GPS of national pride. Forget foreign VIPs from a colonial playbook. Ivorians are reclaiming their roads one signpost at a time. Because who needs Avenue de Paris when you've got Boulevard of the Brave? After all, when it comes to identity, sometimes the shortest route to the future is by the way of your own street. And that wraps up today's edition of Firstpost Africa. We will be back tomorrow, same time, with more stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and stay tuned to Firstpost.